Welcome back to the movie show. It's the fourth season finale, and today we're to review and discuss the first 2019 film on the show since The Joker Season 1, in which case The Prodigy, a supernatural psychological horror thriller from the studio of 2019's Child's Play, Orion Pictures. It's about a young boy who's the evil reincarnation of the late and then infamous serial killer, terrorizing his family and friends while acting supposedly like a normal and intelligently gifted adolescent, hiding his dark side completely from the public sector. Directed by Nicholas McCarthy, the film mainly stars Jackson Robert Scott, aka JRS for short, Taylor Schilling, Orange is the New Black, Peter Moon, David Colesmith, Chucky, aka Child's Play, Shazam, Christmas Chronicle, Paul Fatux, Brittany Allen, The Boys on Amazon Prime, Arthur Jacob, Eliza Mooncherry, and Ashley Black with Tristan Vasquez. In the year 2010, a dismal Allen escapes a sadist serial killer known as Edward Ed Scar, aka the Thrust Creek Killer, Fatux, who's ambushed shortly after at his isolated cabin by numerous police forces that fatally open fire on the infamous narcissist. At the same time, Sarah Blum Schilling and her husband John Moon have sown their newborn son, Miles, who has dark green eyes much like Ed's. It's precisely on the date of his birth, August 22nd, 2010, or 2010 as also pronounced. Almost a decade later in 2018, Miles JRS is now 8 years old and he's at first viewed accurately as a normal, sociable, intelligent adolescent. But soon he develops and exposes unusual behavior toward his parents, such as prematurely and negatively context vulgar language. Arousing concerns about her son, they consult the local child therapist Dr. Arthur Jacobson and his secretary and wife Jacob plays Jacobson, who advises his parents to record audibly his oral behavior for further analysis while he's asleep, despite John's mild protests. Overnight, Sarah does just this, and the following day he turns it over to Jacobson, who deduced partially so far that while Miles is not possessed by a demonic entity of any kind, he's the reincarnation of another person who's dead at the time, unknown to all, in which case Scar is using Miles as his living adolescent vessel via his then transferred eternal soul since his fatal takedown by local authorities almost 10 years before. At first he's skeptical of this, but soon, after further assessing Miles' antisocial behavior firsthand, she realizes that Jacobson has been right all along. Yet John still refuses to believe in the power of reincarnation, and that could be the reason behind Miles' violent and animal-like personality and lifestyle. It includes Miles gravely assaulting a female bully, Black, for denying him a seat in class earlier in the film. Sarah, for one, notices Miles murdering in cold blood a neighbor's dog with flies and maggots already engulfing the dead domestic creature. So she takes him to see Jacobson personally, and from there he assesses Miles in his office after consulting with Sarah about the audio recording of his newfound Hungarian language he's muttered in his sleep earlier in the movie. A hypnosis session becomes very fruitful when he then speaks to Miles to tell your dark side, Scar, as he covertly writes with a pen in a wooded chair his real last name for Jacobson to discover shortly after. He also deduces to Sarah that Scar's been born of Hungarian heritage years before his downfall as a deranged American-Hungarian serial killer. Knowing it's highly unsafe for his soul to possess Miles at the current age of 8, Sarah and Jacobson secretly talk over the phone of his research online about the murderous man who's been practicing dark magic from his homeland of Hungary to reincarnate himself as her son on the same day Miles was born. Before this, however, Miles ends the life of an innocent and misunderstood young boy, bullying him, Colesmith, to the horror and dismay of John and Sarah. After she discovers numerous newspaper clippings in his room of the late serial killer's corrosive killing spree over the previous years, after a prior nightmare of him murdering her as his true self literally, before the phone call with Jacobson, Sarah has John secretly take Miles to a sanatorium madhouse for analysis and better care, to no avail when Miles, seeing through their plan, strangles and throat slices John from the back seat, causing him to collide his car off the road side rail and into a tree, bluntly in a nearby ditch below. With John now in an extended coma at the ER, Miles, who somehow survived the resulting car accident, is picked up by Sarah and his sitter Chloe Mooncherry. Sarah then realizes that to stop Miles from murdering his final victim, the sole survivor of his murderous past as Scar, she has to sacrificially take the life of the same survivor, Margaret James. So, believing it could free her son of Scar's post-hominous and deviant soul-based possession of him. She travels with Miles to her home, where Sarah has cold feet about doing her in before Miles. She then hears her screams in fear while in the John reconsidering her reasonable but nearly difficult decision, and races out to find Miles holding Margaret at knife point right in front of her. Aside from seeing his strangely green eyes, Margaret hears Miles' Scar speak out the last thing he once told her before his legal execution by gunfire police amid her fruitful escape back in 2010. She recognizes an ID Scar before trying to escape again, despite Sam earlier drugging Miles with sleeping pills before reconsidering her difficult decision whether or not to take Margaret's life for the greater good of her son. Yet, he uses his chosen weapon of a cold-blooded murder to fatally graze and dismember her quickly. Sarah then confronts Miles in a cornfield nearby, and he tells Sarah that he's now in full control of Miles' body and soul for eternity, regardless that his unfinished business has been taken care of. Sarah is about to fatally wound her then-former son out of pitiful disownment and morally sacrificial self-defense, when a farmer shoots her to death, under the infamous impression that she's the killer, not Miles' Scar. Assuming he's an innocent adolescent, the farmer takes Miles to his place, shortly after he's been placed in a foster home until John recovers from his coma under the care of his sitter-turned-legal guardian. In his new room, Miles visualizes himself while armed with another knife, as his true self both figuratively and literally. Ending the movie on an ominous and negative note, Edward Ed Scar, aka Miles Blum, is the film's main villain in the form of a post-hominous and reincarnated foreign and migrant serial killer in America, and a dark magic superior from his national homeland. It's unclear of his backstory before the film's main events, but after his death in 2010 on the evening of Miles' birth, despite being exposed indirectly by Margaret, the only female victim he has failed to horribly do in secret, has used at the last second of his life, and then death to transfer his soul into that of Sarah's newborn child via the dark magical powers of satanic pagan reincarnation. Therefore, under the namesake child alias Miles Blum, by age 8, begins to enact antisocial behavior concerning Sarah and John, whom he uses vulgar language at, as well as gruesomely retributing against two separate bullies by gender group, one of whom is someone from his class that he claims the life toward the end of the movie by drowning him in a nearby creek, similar to what's happened in Godsend, where a clone child of two mourning parents, supported by scientists in genetics played by Robert De Niro from The War with Grandfather, The Joker, and Shark Tale, begins antisocially behaving for unknown reasons of infamy. See beyond his 8th birthday. Both Miles and the cloned child of a dead one in that other movie are both 8 years old, and they are of differing types of misguided products of nature science between human cloning and reincarnation by satanic paganism. While Miles is told by Sarah that she's to love him forever, no matter what, by the end of the film he learns that Scar has overtaken his entire soul and body, upon earlier hearing this from her personally. But like the clone child in Godsend, Miles Scar is the only person to endure his final showdown with his former parents, through relocation to a new home and in a new city town. Totally different from this is that by the end of the Prodigy, only his father is in a medicinally induced but extensive coma, and his mother's been falsely taken out by a farmer trying to protect Miles out of misguided self-defense, unaware he's the reincarnation of a deceased serial killer from Hungary. On the other hand, the cloned kid's parents will survive in Godsend while hiding, while disowning also, and deserting, De Niro's character in the end. Back to Miles Scar, he's the exact embodiment, both literally and figuratively, of Falk's adolescent innocence, deceptive deviancy, murderous and antisocial lifestyles, discaring for human lives, and morbidly foul feloniousness. In any case, particularly similar evil child characters like Miles Scar in the film also include other film examples of this kind, like Brendan Brayer, aka Brightburn, of the hit 2019 namesake superhero horror thriller The Two Terrible Adolescents in the Turning 2020, the Orphan Films' Esner, Lily Sullivan in 2009's Case 39, and 2006's The Omen. But in the case of Miles in the film, aside from him being a post-hominous but reincarnated serial killer through dark magical powers of Satan paganism immigrated with him from Hungary, the actual murderous man in child skin and clothing exterminates anyone to stand in the way of his gruesome goals, including nearly doing his father in and indirectly murdering his mother in cold blood. Overall, Miles, after these earlier set examples, is the number one evil adolescent character in horror film lore, especially, and specifically, the Prodigy. Sarah and John are the prime protagonists in the movie next to Dr. Jacobson, whose real name, in reality, is almost the same as the characters. Sarah is a caring and loving mother who has germinated Miles in the first place a few minutes after the police-based death of Scar, per the courageous and heroic acts of Margaret, his final victim who has single-handedly survived his sadist and rancid wrath in 2010, and she and John don't know Scar has reincarnated himself into the soul and newborn body of Miles up till it's too late. John also portrays loving compassion, caring, and parental morality for his and Sarah's son, despite the 8-year-old adolescent being under the influence of the deceased Scar, acting out antisocially between terrorizing and threatening kids who bully him in school and using highly foul language for the wrong reason, even toward them both. Although Sarah finds out through Jacobson about his son being overtaken by Scar posthumously this way, John remains very skeptical of the concept of reincarnation by Satan pagan dark magic, almost 10 years before. It is yet what gets him almost ended when he attempts to take Miles to a madhouse for troubled youths like him, the mentally and criminally insane adolescents, generally speaking. Sarah decides to end Scar's sole surviving victim before he does, but shortly after has second thoughts of going through with it, and at the last second, she sees Miles holding Margaret captive with his newfound knife before immediately doing her in grisly. The one mistake Sarah has made in the film was vowing to love her son no matter what, and this has prompted Scar to claim full control of Miles's body and soul, even after completing his unfinished business, in which case slaughtering his final victim as he should have almost a decade earlier. It's also what led to Sarah's untimely demise by a farmer shooting her to death wrongfully in the attempt to protect Miles. As for Dr. Jacobson, he's the reason that Sarah's to look into Miles' antisocial behavior. Per his hypnotic therapy session with Miles, Jacobson finds the wood-engraved last name Scar in the nearby chair that Miles has been sitting in earlier. It enables him to research the name and inform Sarah that he and Scar are technically the same person through reincarnation out of satanic paganism in the dark mystic arts. It's also how Sarah learns the dead serial killer who's influencing and overtaking Miles, that way has been unable to finish off Margaret back in 2010 per her survival and escape from the monstrously foreign maniac. Migrant, illegal or not. Despite his minor amounts of screen time as well as that of John, he represents mainly loyalty, therapeutic counseling, psychiatric aid to children, including Miles as a special case, and determined support for Sarah's cause to uncover what's happened to Miles and how to negate it for good. The minor characters in the film are Margaret, Miles' two child bullies, and Chloe. While Chloe is Miles' sitter, embodying foster parenthood as a legal guardian at the end of the film, carrying compassion and trusting support toward Miles and his parents, Margaret depicts the need to overcome horror, fear, and traumatic experiences like the one she's endured, with Scar by escaping in secret and alerting the police that confront and fatally open fire on Scar. She also portrays overcoming of tragedy and vain sacrifice when Miles makes himself known as the newly reincarnated Scar, before claiming her life gruesomely. Therefore, Margaret's not the only sole survivor of the killer's year-old murder spree, but also the tragic minor hero, to be ended by Scar as supposedly innocent child. Miles's bullies who attend his school are unjustly retributed against by Miles, from him brutally grazing his female bully's hand with a hammer, to fatally drowning a male bully at the dreaded hands of his evil soul-overtaken vessel of Miles. The primary themes of the film include reincarnation through transmigrating soul-based transfer, even after death, backed up by dark, mystical, satanic paganism, the complex viewing of a child's soul, neutrally good and evil, the unjust taking of human lives, and the dark fact of children carrying bleak and sorrowful childhoods, which the film helps mirror real-life serial killers, i.e. John Wayne Gacy, aka the Killer Clown, Jeffrey Dahmer, H.H. Holmes, Ted Bundy. Even animal cruelty is thematically involved in the particular movie, with Miles butchering a neighbor's dog in one of the most intense scenes in the movie. As it unveils in the film, his intellect is supported by his diagnosis of autism, marking Miles as the first serial killer kid in film to be on the autism spectrum. It may be a far cry from even The Omen as well as how autism works in reality, but does help portray the film's secondary themes of adolescent violence and or rebellious antisocial and immoral disregard for human lives, even of their caring parents. After all, violent and evil children as first created by Hollywood are dark and unpredictably deviant to this day. While the prime positive messages are the same primary and secondary themes of the film, Sarah is its prime positive role model, along with John, because as Miles' parents, they determined to help their troubled youth adolescent son, whatever it takes, even when he's consumed and overtaken by the sinful soul of a deceased serial killer. All the violence and scariness shown in the film include graphical and blood acts of animal cruelty. One scene in the film in which the adolescent villain character does in a neighbor's dog barbarically, a dog being butchered to death, a female character's hand being crushed with a male child character's hammer, some bullying, a mild child character being struck in the head with a pipe wrench and then drowned in a nearby river creek, a nightmare sequence, some jump scares, and disturbing images, and a male character nearly dying in a car accident only to end up in a temporary but extensive coma at the hospital. There are also some intense graphical impalings, blood, gender-based torture, gunfire, forms of graphical dismemberment, the threat of gender-based violation, some argument, a disembodied hand, and some uses of knives for murder, not to forget the use of dark magical satanic paganism for the infamous purpose of sinful forms of reincarnation. Besides some gender references like illegally grinding on another character of a differing gender group, a male character is seen partially clothless, a male child character is seen bare-centered between the ER and in a household restroom scene where he's being bathed by a female character, and a female character being tortured genderly and physically at an isolated location. In the same scene, another female character germinates a newborn male character through agonizing childbirthing. We don't see the infant male character's banana cherries or pre-cut cord, just his bare peaches. The language in the movie includes the F-bomb, the H-word, the S-word, oh my god, the C-word, and some other graphical gender-based references, depictions by descriptions and dialogues and terms, i.e. teats, but used in the negative context of the film, for the film only. Where there are no consumerist content of any kind shown in the film and beyond, the only smoking, doping, and drinking content involved are when some male characters briefly consume and drink booze, but they're not intoxicated, a female character lightly sedating a male child character via prescription narcotics, slight references to abusing drugs, by the way, and minor sequences of smoking. For these reasons, I highly recommend The Prodigy to age groups from late adolescents to adults, even to those who are on the autism spectrum, because, as said, Miles is an adolescent character with autism, which I did not know of until I saw the movie first back in 2019, on the big screen. Thanks for seeing the 4th season finale of the movie show. See you next time.